Just a bit of a warning. Tomorrow could be a very long day here in the United States.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
I cast my first vote for president back in 1972, and I'm proud of that. I was a young man trying to figure out what is right and wrong in this world, and I voted. And times were a little bit of angst even then because, word of Watergate had kind of leaked out a little bit. We still had the Vietnam War. We still had a lot of things in our economy that needed some real help. But I just don't remember people being so belligerent, so angry, so mean, so concerned as people are today. Honestly, I think that here in the United States, we have problems that are far greater than politics and presidential elections and all of that. Because I believe what it says in the scripture that we should not put our trust in princes and people and mere mortals. And too many people today that call themselves Christians are putting too much emphasis that a politician or political party can save our world. It can't. It simply can't. The only thing I believe a political party can actually do, or a president or the right leadership can do, is just delay the inevitable of what we find in God's Word. We're not going to change what the Bible says is going to happen. It's not going to change. I do see that one party would hasten the day of our destruction, morally especially. We already see the evidence now. I'm looking like out in California, school districts saying, we need to change how we grade our students. We no longer can affect their grade because of bad behavior in classrooms or the fact they don't turn their work in. What are we really teaching the next generation? Laziness and narcissism are acceptable in the world. That's going to lead to our ruin. Depending how the vote comes out tomorrow, we may delay for a while God's judgment. But that day of judgment is coming. And on that I have no doubt. Yes, I will vote accordingly, pro-life. I will vote accordingly for policies that don't damage the family, that don't impact the church in a negative way. Yes, I'll make that vote. In fact, I already have. Tomorrow's going to be a long day, and we may not know the results for a while. We might have an idea, but we'll see. On the program today, I bring back a popular guest, the Reverend Dr. Timothy Gahles, and he and I are going to talk about this coming election and its implications on a spiritual and moral level for this country, and what is a global reset. If you don't believe it's happening, man, you need to really pay attention. We'll talk about the pandemic later this week. I call it the Casedemic now. I'm beginning to wonder how magically at certain times case numbers just magically rise. But we're not seeing the corresponding, if you go back to the March-April time frame and even into May, some of this does not make any sense, and we'll get into that later as well. So I want to welcome my guest on the program today. And Timothy, let me just start with this. I don't know if you're a gambling man or not, or if you even want to make a prediction, but if you were a gambling man, do you have a prediction for how things are going to come out tomorrow or sometime after tomorrow?
Yeah, I think my prediction is Trump's going to win by a landslide, but the media is not going to cover that. And they're going to say he stole the election, and they're going to say it's a big, conspiracy against Biden. That's what we're looking at coming.
And I'm thinking in my mind, not so much a conspiracy against Biden, but what I think is going to happen is they're going to keep trying to delay the results by saying, oh, but this state still has 9 more days to count ballots, or this one has 2 days, or we found a trunk full and we're not sure, maybe they're stolen, we don't know. And I think the lawyers are going to descend like locusts starting as the polls close in every state tomorrow. That's what's going to happen. The army of both lawyer sides are going to be out, I mean, literally disputing the election, and then we're going to have rioting in the streets. And I don't see it being, well, I don't perceive it being healthy for anybody.
No, it's not going to be. And you're right about the army of lawyers. Last time I looked, Biden had over 600 lawyers hired and probably in every state, to deal with this. But you're absolutely right. Pennsylvania is a big one right now.
Yeah,
and
with Governor
they're going
Wolf.
to contest it. Oh, yeah. He's a deep state. They're going to contest it. They're going to say that, the ballots hadn't been counted. They need extra days. I mean, that was the whole problem with this mail-in by vote anyway. It's very easily manipulated, very easily done. And everybody knows that. So that's their key to claim that this was stolen or a miscount.
The way I look at it, and this is, once again, I'm giving my feelings having watched elections a good chunk of my adult life. I mean, when I turned 18 back in 1972, I voted that year. I really did. And I've not missed a presidential election, and I rarely missed any other election in my entire lifetime. In my younger years, I missed a couple, only because we were in the middle of moving into a new state and couldn't get registered fast enough. So that's the only time I've missed. I'm one of those that believe that we should take our responsibility seriously when it comes to an election. Unfortunately, we have politicians that don't take it seriously. They think anybody should be able to wander into a voting polling place without any identification and say, I demand my right to vote, even if they're not a citizen or not registered or anything else, or registered in more than one state. You have some college students that think that they can do an absentee ballot at home in New York while they're in college in Pennsylvania and vote in both. You can't. You got to make a choice.
Right. Well, clearly that's what we're up against. I mean, after the last election, we heard of thousands of people who have already died voting.
Yeah. Before they died.
Over and over. Yeah, I'm sure. A decade ago, but they voted, last election. The issue is you're going to have all of those things happening. Really, what is our civil society going to look like come Tuesday and the week after? That's kind of what we've got to prepare for. You hear a lot of different scenarios, but everybody says there's going to be a lot of unrest in different ways, and the question is, what type of unrest are people saying? What have you heard on that? Because I've heard different things.
I'm doing some reading, and you look at some of the major cities, especially the ones that are run by the party that's going to scream the loudest if their anointed candidate doesn't win. Cities like Detroit, cities like Chicago, cities, look like Los Angeles, Rodeo Drive, man. They're boarding up the windows in parts of the Hollywood area. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? Yep. They're and believe me, it's not going to be. I'm going to have to swear off politics for a week after we're done with all this, but I'm just going to look. You don't, as a general rule, see Republican people coming out to destroy and burn and bust up cars and punch people and hit them with baseball bats. That's not their style. And, they may come out and be vocal, but they're not going to sit there and try to set you on fire. I mean, which the Democrats or Antifa doing the Democrats' dirty work, which is exactly what they're doing. They are the dirty work army of the Democrat Party that seeks to become the Socialist Party of the United States. Anybody that is clear-thinking knows that Joe Biden, if they are to win, and they legitimately win, and the Electoral College gets together in December, and he becomes the 46th president of the United States, he will never make it till Easter. He'll be out by Easter. There'll be some. Yep. I mean, look, Nancy Pelosi has already, set that up. They made a big deal about we need a committee to enforce the 25th Amendment. And that's really not for now. That's for a future president. Okay, which future president? Right. The one that you're right. wanting to put in there, because
sure,
Kamala Harris, however you want to pronounce her name, I've heard it Kamala. I've heard her say it. I've heard her say it both ways. So I don't know how. When she was in, I think it was Cleveland, Ohio. Kamala here, she's out there trying to talk to those voting early, and then there right. she's Kamala instead of Kamala or Kamala. It just, it just all over the road. But regardless, she is considered one of the most far left. Forget the word liberal. I don't want to damage the word liberal, because there are some liberals in history that I may not agree, but I have a high level of respect. And
well, the true liberals, okay, the classic liberals,
exactly,
they were okay. The Truman liberals, but they're not around anymore.
Yep. Look, even the Hubert Humphrey liberals were somebody, I may disagree on policy, but in their right. heart, they had the best interest of the country and the people at heart. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
Well, they actually defended the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and freedom. We don't see that now. We see them disparaging.
And many were dodging bullets in the Second World War, either in the
That's right.
out in the Pacific or coming to land, at Normandy. I mean, we have
That's
people
right.
that really fought in a war, and I get it. I understand where their heart is.
Right.
I think the problem with classic liberalism, it tries to replace what Christians should be doing in their churches, and we're giving up something that the Bible demands of us and having government do it on our behalf, which is always going to be a disaster.
Right.
It's always a disaster.
You're exactly right. Yep. And the reason I look at it this way, it's a warfare. But the warfare, I call it, is supernaturalism against naturalism.
Exactly.
Because the classical liberal was one thing, and they entertained metaphysics. They understood supernaturalism to an extent, right?
Absolutely.
But today's liberals have wholeheartedly rejected supernaturalism, God, all of the above, which is why you heard the booing at the Democratic Convention last time when God was introduced, right?
Oh, yeah, or mentioned.
And so now what we have is organized naturalism. Organized naturalism from 20 different avenues is now seeking to reduce mankind. And I say mankind for a reason, because we're spiritual beings. The whole world understands that. Primitive people in the Amazon understand there's a spiritual component to the world, to life, and to humanity. And yet they want to absolutely reduce humanity to a scientific naturalism, which is lopsided. It's like covering one eye and looking at the world with the other one and saying, I'm able to discern everything now. No, you're not. And that's what we're looking at. So we're already off base, and they want to bring a religion, the religion of naturalism,
or
to this
Scientology.
world.
It's really a science or Scientology type religion, is what you've mentioned that before.
Yeah, not Scientology, but scientism. Scientism, because scientism is a religion of science, a worship of it. And so what you and I are seeing right now is just that. We're seeing science, it can say no wrong. It can do no wrong.
Oh, you want to bet? I mean, let's stop right there. One of the themes of the Biden campaign and virtually anybody from the left is we follow the science. We follow the science. We religiously follow the science. We need to follow the science. Yet when half the scientists disagree with the political narrative, they are silenced by the Facebook tyrants. They are silenced by that complete derelict. I hate to say it, but when I saw Dorsey, you remember last week, the hearing, he's trying to defend Twitter. I couldn't decide if he's on opioids or if he's high. He looked like Hunter Biden's, crack smoking buddy.
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry, but this guy came off as like I don't know. He never answered a question. And then he would say, well, we don't do that. And they would say, here, look at the screen. This is what you've done. Didn't know it. It's like, does he even run Twitter? I know does he have any clue of what Twitter really does? Does he even use Twitter? I mean, I have to wonder. So I'm looking at all this. So these tech tyrants, and I consider Google, which runs and operates YouTube, if you're one of the 11,000 physicians that disagree with Dr. Fauci, you are, you are just eliminated. You disappear, just like in China and just like in North Korea or in Vietnam in its day and the Soviet Union. You disappear. You're made a non-entity. Your name is Germany, and your name is never spoken again. You're not. I mean, and this is what's happening. They pick a narrative and they demand science back up the narrative. Not the narrative be backed up by science.
That's right.
And so they've reversed it.
It's inversion of truth. And that's what we're seeing. Naturalism is an inversion of God's created order in his world. And in every aspect, as far as the inversion, which ultimately is satanic, okay? But it's an inversion of man. There is no now male and female. It's whatever. There's 20 different genders or whatever you proclaim to be at this moment. There is no longer right and wrong. Truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. And I was just talking to somebody about that today. He goes to a college and they were teaching him even mathematics. It's a question of feeling. And I said, no. 2 + 2 is going to always be 4. And he said, well, not according to my teacher.
Look, I've met teenagers myself. I met a gal who graduated high school, had turned 18 months before she graduated. She's like 20 years old now. And she will tell you, if you tell her that 2 + 3 only equals 5, she goes, no, that's your reality. And I'm going, what do you mean? So 2 + 3 can equal 7? Yes. If that is your truth, it can always equal whatever you want it to be. And I'm thinking, would you want to have a house built based on those kind of specifications where numbers can mean anything? Would you dare get in an airliner where the mathematics is just up to somebody's feelings? That thing's going to fall out of the sky.
Or the pilot, would you get on a flight when the pilot says, well, one direction is as good as another. Let's just kind of pick any way we want to go. Would you go on that flight? No. You want to get home. And you're right. You can't build a house with that math because math is truth, which is logic, which is universal.
Absolutely. But what the thing is about math, what everybody's disagreeing with, if you stop, and it just hit me, on a spiritual and moral level, there is a standard. Mathematics requires a standard for it to work and function. When you build a house, there has to be a standard unit of measurement or the house is not going to be built. Certain things, gravity has a standard. Exactly.
A universal.
But we are clouding that to say that there is no standard. There is no facts. Truth is what we feel it is for today.
Well, getting back to what your friend there said, that's your reality. Okay, so build the house with your math. Reality is going to smack you in the face.
Of course.
It's not going to happen. This is Aristotle's law of non-contradiction. The more you try to hammer it, it hammers you. And the fact of the matter is you cannot have both be true. They can't be.
They can't.
So reality is going to hit you. You're going to see there's a universal. And math is beautiful because, math is logic, right? And God is the Logos.
Absolutely.
And we have the great Logos logic. Logic didn't come about with you, Bob, or me.
No.
And it's certainly not going to die with us.
No, it's not.
It is something that everybody in the world, even the Amazonian, uses it. But where does it come from? Where is it? Can I put it in a petri dish and study it? No. It exists and it's universal and we're all bound by it.
Well, let's put it this way.
The Logos.
Here's the term. It is observable, as every good scientist taught us back in the ones that we studied in high school and junior high and elementary school. I want to remind you, you're listening to the program Truth to Ponder. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. My guest today is the Reverend Dr. Timothy Gahles, one of my favorite guests, and a lot of people have said that. And today we're talking about the election that comes tomorrow in the United States. My prediction is it will definitely not be resolved tomorrow. And if it is, there'll be such violence in the streets, the likes you've never seen. And it's not going to be coming from the Trump supporters. They may be upset, but they're not going to burn down, their towns, and they're not going to rob the Walmart or the Target or the Best Buy because they're not happy with the results. But those days are coming. Real quick, our website is truth2ponder.com, truth2ponder.com. This program is still on shortwave. We're debating how many frequencies to keep or if there's some changes to be made. We'll be talking about that later this week or into next week. I need to hear from you. If you're listening on shortwave, it is vital because the time is coming to make some decisions on which airings are working and which ones you're not listening to. And so let me know by visit. You can just write me, Bob, at Truth2Ponder, and that's the number 2, Truth2Ponder.com. Bob at Truth2Ponder.com. Let me know if you're listening to this program. Once again, my guest, the Reverend Dr. Timothy Gahles. We're talking about tomorrow's election. And I think that the campaigning has been rather fascinating these days leading up to the day. When you're sitting there with 75-80% of the people have already voted early as compared to the total number of people that voted in 2016.
Right.
And you got to wonder. I was driving through a small town last week in South Carolina, and I saw standing out there in the rain, people standing out for an hour and a half, 2 hours to vote early so they wouldn't have to worry about the rush on Election Day. And I think there are a lot of people concerned about this election, and I think a lot of the numbers that are being tossed around by the intellectually bankrupt CNN and the morally bankrupt MSNBC and the factually bankrupt, the major three networks, they don't have any credibility in my book. They are inventing their own polls to try to suppress the vote. I think they know full well what the real pulse of the United States is, and they are hoping to do two things: suppress the vote, make those that support Trump feel highly defeated, and also give them cover if there's some shall we say, electoral thievery going on in states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, which, because of who runs those states, it would be very possible and very feasible that they could try to get away with it. And I really believe there's going to be an attempt. We're already beginning to see, ballots missing and stuff, and already,
right.
And it's in areas that are all battleground states. It's not happening in a state like South Carolina where the outcome is pretty certain. Only in battleground states do we have all these mysterious problems. I wonder why.
Right. Yeah, of course. And let's take a look at this. I mean, anytime you view on the news, which is not often because they try to block it out, but anytime you look at a Trump rally, where he's speaking, it is jam-packed with people. Jam-packed. And then when you have a Biden rally, there's little circles on the ground for 6 feet apart. And there's maybe 20 people there.
And they're
reporters.
Listen,
yes, it's so over the top. But I agree with you in this sense, Bob. What they're doing is they're saying, Biden is a landslide and he's going to win. So the minute Trump actually wins, if he does, then the people are going to say,
he stole it.
Yes, clearly he stole it.
The Russians did it. The Russians did it.
Yeah,
Russian collusion. Get Mueller back,
Exactly. And they're gonna go ballistic because they believe the lies just like they do with the coronavirus stuff.
Well, yeah, and we'll get on that in just a moment. We're talking about this election, and that my wife and I hate to be the bearer of what I call the bad news. From a theological standpoint, we are not arriving at a better place. We're not one of these what I call post-trib types where we're going to fix things for Jesus to come, and expect. We're definitely not going to fix it at the ballot box. I mean, that's just not going to happen. Anybody that has this fantasy that Christians can just go to the ballot box and fix the world and make it nice for Jesus, you're being deceived by Satan himself. As Christians, you're already being, this world is full of deception. And Jesus warned his disciples not to fall for it. Don't fall for the nonsense. It'll all sound good, but in the final analysis, if you stop for just a moment and put it against everything that Jesus ever said, put all that you hear against all the warnings of St. Paul, St. John, John the Revelator, to all of them.
Right.
A lot of this stuff doesn't pass the smell test. Number one, tell me how China is going to get fixed, before Jesus comes. I don't see that happening anytime soon. The United States, we're following the path of Canada, which follows the path of Europe. It is a post-Christian sewer. I mean, it's what they become. I'm reading a story in there's a church called it uses a K in it, but it's in English, it's the Evangelical German Church. Some kind of Protestant quasi birthed off Lutheranism denomination in Germany. And they have gone strictly social gospel, transgender, gay weddings, everything. They've gone completely into the deception of the world. And the only good thing about that, there's only one good thing that has come out of that. Their numbers have tanked and nobody's going there anymore. Because if the church becomes like the world, why bother to go to the church when you can live for yourself?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think my feeling is personally that we've been abandoned by the majority of our temporal and spiritual leaders, period.
Absolutely.
And because of that, we are seeing we're not just a post-Christian society. We're changing so fast. That was so yesterday, Bob.
Yeah, post-Christian is yesterday.
Yeah,
postmodern is yesterday.
We're an anti-Christian society, and that's what we see significantly with these riots and rioters. It's no longer post-Christian. Now it's a hatred for Christians, and it's burning down churches, destroying religious things, and that all is a prelude to things to come unless we put a stop to it.
Well, stop it. Look at what happened in France this past week. It's funny how the left always seems to be very defensive about the radical parts of Islam. They're always defensive. You can't call it terror. You can't call it this. They're just misunderstood. Or maybe if they had a better jobs program, I've heard it all before. And, so they're just expressing, wait a minute. These are the kind of people that, take 20 Coptic Christians to the shore of the Mediterranean and cut their heads off because they will not renounce Christ.
Exactly.
And what the left loves about radical terrorist Islam is they're willing to do their dirty work for them in killing Christians.
They're doing it to the Christians. That's right. And what you're seeing is this: if somebody went into even a church like in France and cut off a black man's head,
oh yeah,
it would be an absolute riot again everywhere across the country. But if you cut off 2 Christian heads in the Catholic Church, they'll cover it up a bit or say, well, he was just upset.
Yeah.
Or something. Meanwhile,
they can't
be
truthful. They can't be truthful.
Right.
Listen, we got to take a break here as we're coming up to the bottom of the hour here on this Monday, the day before Election Day broadcast. Once again, this is the program Truth, the number 2, Ponder.com. Actually, we're Truth to Ponder. That's our website, Truth, the number 2, Ponder.com. I want to give you my mailing address. Some people feel that it's easier to send a letter, and I've had a few that have come in, and I'll be sharing some of that a little bit later this week as I kind of go through them, and I'm trying to reply to some before I read things on the air. And I'm appreciative of all those that take the time to write. You can just put the name Truth to Ponder. My name is Bob Bierman, And our mailing address in Georgia is our little house up here in the middle of nowhere. And it is 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263. That's 21 Berkshire Lane. And you need to add the number 263 so the little lady in our little tiny post office can figure out which box to put it in. Even though that's our physical address, they have a box and they want you to put that on that line. In the little town of Sky Valley, S-K-Y, Valley, Georgia, and the zip code 30537, 30537. And when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion with the Reverend Dr. Timothy Gahles as we look at what could happen post-election. I don't believe the results will really be in tomorrow, not Wednesday. This could drag on for a couple of weeks, and it's not because of what happened like in Florida 20 years ago. This is going to be a little bit different this time around. I think there's going to be some real attempts to steal an election the likes have never been seen. And we'll talk about which side seems to have the most, shall we say, enthusiasm. There seems to be a bit of an enthusiasm gap. This is Truth to Ponder. We'll be right back.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
A breath of ruach. In a moment. Shalom Aleichem. This is the nice Jewish boy, Jonathan Kahn, your Jewish connection, bringing you the riches of your Jewish roots in Jesus. Now get your pen out as fast as you can so you don't miss out on receiving a special free gift you're going to get and love in a moment. Ruach. It's Hebrew for breath. Try it. Ruach. It's the most basic thing you need for life. Breath. Even more basic than food or water. A few minutes without breathing and your life is pretty much over. But the more alive you are, the more you need to breathe. From birth to death, every moment of your life has to be filled with breath or else you die. So it's not an accident that the word ruach in Hebrew, which means breath, also means the Spirit, as in the Holy Spirit. So the Hebrew word ruach hakodesh, the Holy Spirit, can also be translated as the Holy Breath. And the Hebrew matches up with what Messiah did when he said, receive the Spirit. It says he breathed on them. Because in Hebrew he said, receive the breath, the Spirit. The Spirit is the Ruach. So the Holy Spirit is the holy breath of God. It's his life becoming your life. But the ultimate point is this. Breath is the most basic thing you need in the physical realm. That's why the Holy Spirit is the Ruach HaKodesh, the holy breath, because you really do need him every moment. Your heart needs the Spirit of God just as much as your body needs air. Living by the Spirit is as basic as breathing. And if you try to hold your breath, it's going to be a real struggle to stay alive. Many believers are doing just that, holding their breath for years, living on past experiences with the Spirit, and you're suffering from spiritual oxygen deprivation. Some have even expired. Now, with some believers, you wouldn't notice it, but if you want to be alive, breathe. Get a breath of fresh ruach. Live by the Spirit, walk by the Spirit, breathe the Spirit, rejoice in the Spirit, stop holding your breath, and receive the ruach. It's as simple as breathing. Want more? Ask for the ruach. Now, if somebody offered you a gift of $1 million, what would you say? Well, something better than $1 million. Something will help give you a strong, victorious life. A free subscription to Sapphire's Vitamins for Your Spirit and the incredible Mystery of the Temple Doors, all free. You'll love it. How do you get all these free gifts? Easy. Just remember Jesus' Hebrew name, Yeshua, and dial it. Just dial 1-800-YESHUA-1. It's so easy, but call now. 1-800-YESHUA-1. Now, the harvest is great. The laborers are few. I invite you to join with me in the harvest. You don't need a plow, just an open heart and a pen. And you can reach the unreached peoples of the world. Just call now. 1-800-YESHUA-1. That's YESHUA-1. Or write me direct, the nice Jewish boy, at Box 1111 in Lodi, New Jersey, 07644. That's the nice Jewish boy, Box 1111, Lodi, New Jersey, 07644. Till next time, this is Jonathan Kahn saying Shalom Aleichem. Peace be to you, my friend, in Messiah ben Elohim, the Son of God.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
And welcome back to part 2 of the Monday edition of Truth to Ponder, this day before Election Day in the United States in the year of 2020. And my mind goes back to 20 years ago, the day before Election Day, and we thought about would Al Gore win? Would George W. Bush win? And what would that mean for the nation? And then we hit Florida. Good old Florida. Yeah, I know I live there. And I've lived in parts of Florida on and off for well over 20 years. I can honestly say that where I lived in Florida 20 years ago, we had absolutely no issues with counting our votes. We just didn't seem to have an issue. The Panhandle didn't have an issue. Most of North Florida, no issue. The west coast of Florida, literally no issues. Only 3 places did Florida have any issues 20 years ago. The most dependable county for screwing things up in the state of Florida is, I hate to say it, I know maybe someone is listening, is Broward County. Broward County has got to be one of the most messed up counties in Florida, followed by Palm Beach County, just to the north, and then to a lesser degree, but still there in parts of, not all of, Miami-Dade. They seem to have issues with following simple instructions, or they use that as an excuse to explain the troubles that they had. And so it's kind of like, well, we're not capable of doing anything, so you need to help us out and think for us. And to me, I don't know where this mentality came, and we saw it 20 years ago, where people, how do these people survive in life? My guest on the program is Dr. Timothy Gahles, and the Reverend Dr. Timothy Gahles. And I want your take on this as we look at the election, and I'm going to compare this in my mind to 20 years ago, because I can remember what it was like. What was the enthusiasm like 20 years ago compared to some of the enthusiasm today and some of the differences? Now, I'll give you some of the differences that I've observed. You're up in the northeastern part of the United States, and I'm sure there are not a lot of people that would dare put a Trump sticker on their car, even if they wholeheartedly support him, for fear of having their car damaged. Would that be a safe bet in your part of the world?
Yes, there are a lot of people who are afraid to, even wearing a Trump hat. Mm-hmm. People are surprised if a friend of mine puts a Trump hat on and goes out. They say, oh my gosh, you wore that? Because they're watching people get beaten up just for shot, believe it or not, just for wearing it.
Yep. So
we've never seen anything like that before.
No.
Never.
I mean, I up here in the mountains of Georgia, where we spend a good chunk of our time, it is a rural area, conservative area, and also a lot of retirees are up here, full-time, some like me, part-time. And you know, nobody, if there's a Biden Harris, or should be Harris Biden, because that's really what the ticket is, if somebody has that out in front of their house, nobody's shooting it. Nobody's trying to run it over with their Jeep or something. And then it's fine, if you want to vote for him, go for it. And nobody seems to. And I'll say one thing up here, even among the Democrats, they're not. There's no real issue or major problem with anybody damaging vehicles that support Trump. So maybe it's just the nature of the part of the world in which we are. But I know that I've been in other parts of the country where I wouldn't dare say that, because that's not how it is. That, you know, you kind of keep your politics to yourself in your neighborhood for fear of people damaging your house or your car or you, I mean, or your dog. I mean, people have killed pets because someone had a Trump sign on their house.
You know, it is insane. And people have, for a long time, we always used to say, just keep religion out of politics, right? Don't talk religion and politics. Well, number one, you have to, because everything you do is based on a moral premise of some kind, and that includes politics. Absolutely. Do I like talking about politics? No. But because in my opinion, and I give this little joke in a way, I say poly equals many, and ticks are little blood-sucking creatures.
That's a pretty good way to describe it.
Yeah, so the way I
can't argue with that logic.
No, that's politics. But nevertheless, here we are. And we're looking at a time and an age here where it's not, hey, you're a Democrat and I'm a Republican. It's you're an evil slime that needs to be eradicated from the face of the earth so we can bring in our utopia. Now, That's a huge difference than what it once was.
Yeah, true.
And that's what we're looking at. And it very much so is that, because it's agenda driven and emotionally driven. And so whoever is going to win office is not the end of this.
No.
Obviously, we said before, if Trump gets in, there's going to be, people are going to go ballistic. And if he doesn't get in, people are still going to go ballistic during whatever fight in between for votes. They're still going to go ballistic, and then they're going to implement some crazy stuff, which they talked about themselves. Yeah. Whether it's Antifa, BLM, even the Democratic leaders. We've seen things unfolding and big ideas that will change humanity itself, not just nations. Okay. Yeah. This is a fight for a country, but globalism and the globalists don't want countries anymore. No, they don't want countries. They want a one world, but they want it under them.
And I'll tell you something else they don't want, the one world government types. They don't want peace in the Middle East. It goes against their grain.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that.
Oh, absolutely. It doesn't serve their purpose in what I call self-destruction of continents and countries. The idea of anger and war, and I mean, I'm thinking back. I'm going back now 40 years ago. We're going to go back to 1980, and I remember that election well because I was, I was still on the air and radio, still doing a lot of news work, and here we had, Jimmy Carter, the incumbent, going up against, Ronald Reagan, and a lot of people thought that Carter would probably pull it out. That's what the polls said even back then. I remember the polls said that Reagan really couldn't pull it off, but he did. And then in his second election, by one of the most massive landslides the United States has ever seen. And in a way, Ronald Reagan was, for his time, a polite and vastly more tame Donald Trump. Let's be honest, he was a very civil, very congenial Donald Trump, not an issue. And so what we're seeing is in a small sense, kind of the same repeat way back when. You have an incumbent and who was voted in overwhelmingly popular at one point and coming up now for re-election. And there's an enthusiasm for the incumbent. And look, conservatives normally don't go out and make a big deal and do the kind of things that I'm seeing them do this year. They never did this stuff in 2000. They never did this stuff in 1992 or 96 or any year that I can remember and watching the politics of the time. I've never seen like the interstate that surrounds Cincinnati, Ohio. It's their bypass superloop, as they would call it. You've never seen 80 miles of cars in support of Trump going around that circle by the hour. That's never happened before in Cincinnati. It's happening all over. These boat rallies, everything. There's an enthusiasm. As far as the eye can see, people are getting out for the first time. They may not have all the stickers on the car, but at least when they get together, they feel safer in a crowd, and that's what I think a lot of this really is, safety in numbers. And you were talking before about, a Biden rally has little circles out there, and there's 6-foot circles, and those circles are 6 foot in the other circle, and then you got a few people allowed in their cars, and then he speaks or she speaks.
And why do you think that is? Because they're trying to portray Biden as a rule follower. He believes in science. We have our 6-foot increments that we have to be in, our social distancing. We're obeying things. But Trump, look at these reckless people all gathering together. They're super spreaders. Trump's rallies are super spreaders, is what they say.
I think
this is a joke.
I know. I've looked at some of the numbers, and you and I have both talked about this, and we may talk about it again when we're trying to sort through the election, if it's still going to be dragged out for weeks. The guy that I'm trying to remember his name, and I had it on the tip of my tongue, the guy that invented the PCR test, the poly-chain reaction test, that's what PCR stands for, and the guy that invented that, Nobel Prize winner for, science and medicine and everything else, warned the world never to use this test to detect viruses in people. Yet we're doing it.
Right.
And the reason he said
died,
that, I know. And the reason he said that was this test can amplify things that aren't really the virus and make you believe that it could be. It has a purpose, but for mass testing of people around the world, that is not one of them. And here we are using...
It's not to diagnose.
No, it's not to be used, and he made it very clear. And you're right, then he died.
His name was Kary Mullis was his name. And he said the PCR test is not for diagnosing anything at all. It has a totally different meaning. But, I will say this, and of course I'm not saying it's a conspiracy, but he died about a week before the coronavirus pandemic started.
What? And was he listed as a coronavirus death?
Probably. Probably. I wouldn't doubt that.
No, but this test, and one of the things we're finding now, let's go back and sometimes we have a disconnect between the reality of last month, 3 months, 2 months, 6 months ago. Let's go back to the beginning of this pandemic. The only people that were being tested were people that were presenting symptoms and were actually sick. They either came there with a really bad fever, or they had the cough, or they had this, that, or the other. In other words, I can remember, and I'm going to talk for the county that I worked for when we were setting up mobile testing early on. This is like in March. And boy, we had this whole screening process of anybody pulling into the parking lot. If you didn't have a fever, you went to the next person in a different line. And then they would check symptoms. And if you didn't meet our criteria, they'd say, sorry, we can't test you because, you're probably not, right, don't have it. And we're not going to, quote, waste what tests we have. So early on, the only people being tested were the people that presented themselves as sick as a dog, whether it's the flu or whatever it was. We only were testing people that presented in all of March, and this went into April, and all the way to the beginning of May. We only tested sick people. Now, right, during that time, the case numbers, but most important, hospitalizations and death numbers skyrocketed all together at the same time. That's not the case these days. This whole thing has changed. Now that everybody and their kid brother can get a test for showing up behind a fast food place where there's a mobile clinic out there, anybody can just walk in and get a test. And anybody can sign up to get a test, not show up, and still test positive. We've seen that happen many a time. They sign up for a test, they don't show up, and then they get a positive result in the mail. You've seen that. I've seen it. Mm-hmm. But we have a casedemic, not a pandemic right now. We have all these new cases, and a lot of these people that have these positive results, a lot of them never get sick, or their symptoms are super mild. We're not seeing these numbers just rising universally across the country, with people suddenly being shoved into the ICUs and on death's door.
Well, you know what they did, and I've seen some institutions that I'm familiar with doing it even now. In the past, they gave, if you had a positive result, you were to get it tested again because they knew there were a measure of false positives.
A lot of them.
So they asked you to do it again. And if you got a negative, then you had to do it one more time to confirm that it was a negative. Mm-hmm. However, a new order just came out recently, and we're now told in many healthcare institutions, once you have a positive with that test, that's it. You're not to be retested again. You're not to be retested again at all, not even to confirm it. And my question is, why? Because they want to keep it at a positive. They don't want it to become two negatives, right? So then you're not a positive case anymore. Now, once you get a positive case, we're told you cannot and will not be retested again. So what's going on here? Where's the magician's hand again?
It's a casedemic. It's a casedemic, and I know it. Look,
you got it.
Look at the new White House press secretary. She tested positive, but she's not showing any symptoms to this day. Where's the illness? And this is not. She's not alone in this. She's absolutely not alone. Look, There's a lot we know about this virus. There's a lot that we're not being told about it, which I think needs to get out. Some of it's actually good news, but we can't. Between now and the close of the polls tomorrow, it's not going to happen in this country to ever share good news. And even then, as long as Trump is the president, maybe, let's put it this way, if Biden somehow pulls out a win, and I'd be surprised. I mean, I lean in the direction of how I felt 4 years ago, and I feel an enthusiasm out there that I was talking to a couple from Florida that admitted that they were, they're retired and they live in a part of the state and they near the Georgia line, and they were not, shall we say, they were a little lax in some of their voting habits over the decades.
Right.
But not this time. Not this time. They are not taking a chance, that they felt secure that Trump would win last time, and they got a little concerned, as the Broward numbers are coming in, and they said they're not going to let that happen. And they took care of their voting, and like I did with ours, based out of Florida, I know that our ballot is there, and I know, thankfully, I can trust our county. There's some counties in Florida I would physically have to go down there to be certain, and even then you're not certain. But at least where I'm at, I don't have that fear, but there are places in Pennsylvania, there are places in Ohio, there are places in Michigan and Wisconsin that I would not trust those that are taking my ballot or putting me into the election machine thing to do my vote. I would have a serious concern. And now with Minnesota in play, that'll be. I mean, I'm not going to bet on that one. I think it's too close for comfort to. But on the other hand, if he won it by 1.5, it wouldn't surprise me either, because I think my wife made a statement one time, and we're going to have to watch our time here. But my wife made a fascinating statement. Satan always overplays his hand. He can't help it. He absolutely, because of his narcissism and his God complex that he wanted to be God, he overplays his hand, and he never learns. And I think that there's some overplaying of hands going on in some parts of this country right now. And I wonder if it'll come back. If it would, the way that it doesn't matter to me which way the election goes, it's not going to shatter my faith. And that's what I want to close on this program. We'll be back tomorrow again. I'm going to ask you to be back tomorrow as we talk on Election Day. And we'll be talking before the polls close. Somebody may hear a recording of the program after they close, and you can find out just how wrong we were in maybe your state or county or whatever the case may be. But when I use that term, overplaying their hand, what comes to your mind in some of the things we're seeing today? I mean, social media overplaying their hand to the point of being dead obvious and getting caught, and it could have a repercussion. If Biden were to win legitimately, to me that just says that the time of Jesus coming is vastly closer than when we thought the other day. But if Trump wins, maybe we get a slight, and I use the word slight cautiously, reprieve, because the deep state is still going to want his head on a literally on a pitchfork for all to see. I mean, I think that if Trump wins, there's going to be violence in the streets and people will die. People will die. There's no, I don't see, and people's livelihoods will be destroyed. Neighborhoods will be torched. Businesses, I mean, they're preparing for it now.
Well, what I would say is this, okay? Because I see this agenda-driven politics right now from the left and from the globalist deep state, the idea is a global plan called the Great Reset, and it's already underway. So they need Trump out of the way so it can be a smoother transition. They know they're going to deal with opposition worldwide. If Trump makes it in, all hell is going to break loose because they want him out, and they're going to have to go to more drastic means to implement this great reset, which, like I said, has already begun. So this crisis that we see with the coronavirus and all that, it's really serving, to make it so there's no recourse of nations. All right, the Great Reset needs to be irreversible because they're going to put it through come hell or high water, and we're going to watch that happen. But if Trump gets in, you're right, we might have a slight reprieve, and we have a fight in our hands. So either way, the common American citizen, world citizens really, people from all over the world, have a fight on our hands, a rather big one against globalism and the Great Reset, which will redefine humanity and everything you once knew to be true.
Timothy, we're going to have to leave it here for today, and I'd like to pick up on this theme tomorrow as we actually go into Election Day 2020. What a strange year this has been. Hurricanes in November it's just been a weird year. I've never seen the likes of it in my entire life. I believe that we need to take off our blinders, our rose-colored glasses for just a moment, and recognize that God is giving us plenty of warning signs of things and disturbances in our earth. There is a spiritual battle going on, and unfortunately, too many Christians today don't see it or refuse to see it. Many go to churches, and they have for years, where it's all about what I get from going. And I get entertained. I sit in a comfortable seat, and I hear a message that just makes me happy about myself. Other churches have given up the gospel of Jesus Christ entirely and now preach a damnable social gospel that is sending people straight to hell. I simply can't put it any other way. That is exactly what is happening in many of our mainline churches. They will someday become the acceptable state church in a globalistic world because they preach that all roads lead to heaven. They deny that Jesus Christ is the way and the truth and the life. They deny that. They'd rather look for social equality, whatever that is. And they don't share the gospel anymore. They want government to do the things that the church used to do, and they want to give up their role in society. Like I say, they parade around in their vestments and their costumes and pretend that there's something important. And all they are is an element of Satan in our world. I can't say it any stronger than that. Many of our mainline denominations have literally turned 100% apostate. They are no longer preaching the gospel. And St. Paul says they should be shunned. They are an anathema. They are cursed by God. And we see the result right here in our own world in the United States with all our technology, all of everything we've got. Here we are in panic over a virus, and we may end up losing our freedoms in very short order. I'm going to run out of time here in just a moment. We only have so much time each day because of the airings on shortwave. If you listen on shortwave, would you let me know what frequency and time and day? Frequency and time is most important, but I need to know because I've got to make some decisions in the next week or so. It's really come down to that as far as shortwave. Go to our website, which is Truth to Ponder, truth2ponder.com. Send me an email at bob@truth2ponder.com. Our mailing address in Georgia, if you'd like to contact us, is 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263, in Sky Valley, Georgia, zip code 30537. That is 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263, Sky Valley, Georgia, 30537. Be back tomorrow.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth2ponder.com. That's truth2ponder.com. Truth to Ponder, shining the light of truth. in a darkening world.